Hey, this is Scott Stevens, one of the pastors here at Northway Christian Community Church. I don't know when you're watching this, so maybe I should be saying I hope you had a great holiday, because this sermon is sort of set to go the very first weekend, so January 1st of 2023. So maybe that's when you're catching it, right there on that day. Maybe it's 6 months after that and you're catching it, but I love this concept. We just put 3 sort of sermons together out there with testimonies on 3 topics. One on singles, right? Great topic. You could check that one out. One on family, parenting, marriage, great topic. And then they gave me legacy. And I think they were thinking like we need something for old people to watch. So we'll have Stevens talk about legacy. And I just want to say, like, if you're an old person, I'm glad that you're checking this out. But if you're a young person, don't click off and say, oh, I should be watching one of the other ones because this is for old dudes, because it's not. Like, you'll see when I begin to dig into legacy, it's a lot more than just being old and doing something that you'll be remembered for. A good friend of mine, Brad Henderson, is going to talk also in this and share his story, some incredible work that he's done in Haiti. But before, could we just look at legacy? Like, what is legacy? And the definition is it's basically something passed on. Like, that's the broadest definition of legacy. It can take on like a lot of different forms. It could take on faith, right? Well, I mean, right? Because this is a sermon, so we're going to talk about legacy of faith. But it also could be monetary, like leaving a financial legacy. It could be leaving a legacy of character or reputation, setting an example that will guide future generations. Legacy, it's this other big broad thing. It's this a lasting impact on the world. So that's what a legacy is. It means dreaming big and changing the world for the better. And I think anytime that you talk about legacy, it's got to be next generation oriented. Whatever legacy that maybe you're pursuing or that's come upon you, that you've stepped into, it's got to be something that can connect to and that the next generation can grab a hold of. I have a picture that hangs in my office. I'll show it to you in just a second. It's of Daniel in the lion's den, right? And before I show it to you, what do you think of that? When you think of Daniel in the lion's den, I don't know, like it's been in every single children's Bible story since forever, right? Like that's one of the favorite ones you tell kids. And Daniel, he's often thought of or portrayed as like this young sort of buff dude. He gets thrown into that lion's den and he's like staring these lions down and they're like circling all around him and they're roaring at him and he's like, yeah, come on. But did you know that historically, you know, Daniel was probably 80 years old when he was dropped into that lion's den? Think about that for a minute. Like, this is a guy that's lived decades. So this is the picture that's actually in my office, and you can see it's an old Daniel. Like, he's balding and gray. He's 70, 80 years old. There's so much detail in here. I just love his quiet confidence, right? He knows he doesn't stand a chance against these lions. And he's just gazing up towards the heavens, and he has complete trust in the Lord. And that story is such a big part of Daniel's legacy, right? He is known for the guy that got dropped into the den and the lions spared him. But that's not where his legacy began. Like, if you know the story of Daniel, he was exiled. So his nation, his country's run over, defeated. And they gather up a lot of the youngest, brightest, healthiest men, and they exile them. They take them as prisoners. And it's there that in Daniel 1, verse 6, it says, but Daniel resolved that he would not defile himself. In this pivotal moment, it's chapter 1, it's the first scene. Daniel's on the scene as a teenager, and he says, no, I'm not going to conform to the ways of this culture. And in Daniel 1:9, it says, and God gave Daniel favor and compassion in the sight of his captors. His legacy began with a decision to say, no, I'm going to continue to be faithful to my Lord. He big risk in that moment. They could have just they just could have killed him, sent him away. But he goes on to have favor of God. He goes on to interpret dreams for the king several times. Decades go by. Daniel and his friends, they face this fiery furnace. Some of us know that story. More interpretation of dreams. But through that all, he begins to gain influence and authority in the land that he's been exiled to. It's later then in his life, after regime changes and authority changes and king changes, and now, this group gets together and they plot to wipe Daniel out. They're like, get this edict signed, and go back and read the story, but and they trick him, and they catch him publicly praying to his Lord. And that's what gets him thrown into the lion's den. The king doesn't even want to do it, but he broke sort of this edict. And in Daniel 6:22, it says the morning came, and it says they find him alive in the den. He says, my God sent his angels and shut the lion's mouth, and they have not harmed me. A legacy that changed kings' hearts for God, a legacy that has been passed down throughout generation after generation, recorded in the Bible, is this legacy of Daniel. But it started with just a simple decision to say, no, I'm going to follow the Lord. So here's what I want you to get at here. Like, if you got a big, broad topic or point for this sermon, legacies are not necessarily something that you sit down one day and craft, that you carefully plan out, like a business plan. I'm going to grow my business over the next 30 years. No, legacies start with just simple yes decisions in the littlest of things. Legacies start with seeing an open door from the Lord and stepping into it, and not knowing necessarily what's going to happen way down the line. So if you're young, your legacy could be being formed right now, just in the littlest decision that you're going to make today. And if you're more seasoned like me, I like using the word seasoned instead of old, but if you're more seasoned like me, legacy is building on past decisions and mistakes and failures and the mess, but continuing to move forward, to pass something on of faith and of value to the next generation. And I can't think of anybody more so qualified to talk about legacy than Brad Henderson. A couple things about Brad Henderson. He's a friend, like a really good friend of mine. He ran a large youth group in the North Hills while I was running a large youth group in the South Hills, and we'd bring kids together for these camps, and we got to know each other years, like 25 plus years ago, and we built an incredible friendship. As a young man, Brad founded something called Surf City. So if you've been around Northway and you've got kids, you might have sent them to Surf City, Michigan. Brad did that in his 20s, and it was also there that he took his first trip to Haiti. And it was there in Haiti that his heart was broken and changed. And he was just there taking a youth group on a mission trip. And if he would have thought about that first trip, and then you'll hear from him about what's going on in Haiti now, that God has allowed to happen through him over the years, it's just absolutely amazing. Brad now is the president of the Pittsburgh Kids Foundation, and I'm blessed to sit on that board. That organization, it runs the Laurelville Retreat Weekends. It trains youth leaders in the city. Surf City. And then it also has this incredible connection over the years in Haiti. Brad's married to Beth. She's amazing. 3 amazing adult children. Now, here's why I wanted to introduce Brad a little, because this is some of the stuff he's probably not going to say. He's also the chaplain for the Pittsburgh Penguins. He's also the chaplain for the Pittsburgh Pirates. Brad is an Ironman triathlete. Yeah, he internationally, all over the world, he runs in these competitions. He's ranked globally. There's that commercial, right? I don't know, it was for Dos Equis, that beer or whatever. It says, this guy's the most interesting man in the world. And I see that commercial. No, I don't think so. Brad Henderson is the most interesting man in the world. So I've asked him to just share a little bit of his story, the legacy that was sparked in Haiti, that is continuing, and then who knows, what's going to happen through his efforts and through the blessing that God has placed on him in Haiti. So take a good listen to Brad, my friend.
We had just come in on this puddle jumper flight over the mountains, dropped into the airport. There were armed guards in the towers with machine guns, and I just remember the kids looking at me thinking, what have you gotten this into? And I remember feeling myself, what have I gotten this into? And I just remember the trip through Cap Haitian, which is the second largest in Haiti, just being overwhelmed, first of all, by just seeing poverty everywhere we looked. Dilapidated buildings, people in need of clothing, just garbage everywhere, and just the sights and the smells, and just being overwhelming by the chaos of driving through a strange city. Just really asking God, what am I doing here? What can I possibly do? And really feeling helpless. Just heard that still small voice that just said, hey, Brad, I just want you to love these kids. That was an encouragement to me, because that's one thing that I felt like I was pretty good at. So I just kind of focused in on that and dialed in on that. And we went back for a number of years. The second trip that I was on, some of the teenage kids pulled me in a classroom. They felt like God had given them this vision to do this community development in this community close by that was the poorest area in the region. So they had sketched out a medical clinic, a children's home, talked about water and sanitation, the need there, and just asked if I would be willing to partner with them. Here they are, kids growing up in an orphanage, literally had nothing, and yet they were just still so outward focused, wanting to do for others what God had done for them. So I said, sure, I'll join you. And I'm kind of smiling now because I remember that moment thinking, I'm not sure what I can do. I'm just a youth pastor from Pittsburgh, not a whole lot of means, not a whole lot of connections. But I just remember God saying, hey, just love these kids, support them in their dreams. So for about 10 years, not much happened with the vision. And it took a long time to create I2D. Their nonprofit, and put that all properly through the Haitian government and those channels. So I got a call, hey, you got to come see. We got a piece of land that we think we'd like to get started on. We want to know what you think. Really rough area that I'd hear in about years, not a safe area for an American to travel out to. There are certain pockets that are worse than others, and this was the worst of the worst, to the point where the government had decided to turn this area into literally a large garbage dump. But they felt very clearly called to invest in this area. They had felt that way since young people. They knew it was the area of greatest need, and they felt like that's where God wanted them to be. We bought it. We bought a piece of land, and we got started. And for the next 5 or 6 years, things were really slow going. I tried as best I could, pretty much on my own, to raise some finances. There was a pile of rocks there. I'd take kids there, and in faith, we'd pray that there'd be a children's home there someday, and just not making much progress. But then fast forward to January of 2010, the big earthquake in Haiti that I think, probably just about everybody watching this video remembers, seeing those images. For the first time, made people realize just the extreme poverty, the situation that people were living under. And yeah, an earthquake had just happened, but honestly, as somebody who had been going to Haiti for a number of years at that point, things didn't look that much different in those videos. And I was really struggling as to whether or not I should make that trip. Was it safe? Would I be in the way? And I just really felt like God was communicating to me that I needed to be there. So I went. A big part of my reason for going was to bring cash down there, honestly. Had a big bag of cash, had to sleep outside the airport in Santiago. That was my pillow. I remember crossing the border, and there were a lot of Haitians trying to get out of the country. And we were some of the few trying to get into the country, just the shouting, having to hand our passports over to somebody we didn't know, and they took them in a back room, and we're just hoping they're gonna bring them back. But I just remember the feeling of crossing into Haiti and the sun coming up after 36 hours of this crazy experience, and just being invigorated, just realizing, hey, I felt like God had created me for this moment. But the whole earthquake effort really energized not only that immediate effort, but the community development that we were hoping to do long term. The orphanage, the children's home, which was kind of step one of the vision, was completed within 6 months. It's a $15 million community development project at this point. 4 schools now. There's a hospital, medical clinic. We've got community health workers that go out in the community and see over 200 patients a day. Water, sanitation, project agriculture. Early on when the children's home had just opened up, there's 40 kids there now, 182 in total in the 3 children's homes. But the IDD children's home, there were the original 7 kids. They were like 3 years old, got off the airplane, pulled up in the truck, and they were sitting out in the front steps just eating mangoes. I was just there in May and thought, hey man, it would be super cool to reenact that picture. We were there on a day school was getting out, and the older kids were all in their school uniforms. So I got the kids to sit on the steps in the exact same spots. That was just a fun idea at first, but just, powerful. It was just such a clear picture of how God has used these young leaders down in Haiti to transform another generation of kids. But I think what's amazing is, as big as the vision is that these young people had and have, God's taken it to a whole new level. Haiti's a country in just incredible need right now. I've got a 30-year history there, and I can say without reservation that it's in rougher shape than it's ever been before. And we just feel like there's just so much more work that we can be doing there to meet people's physical needs, but most importantly, their spiritual needs and sharing the love of Jesus Christ with them. It's amazing when we love people over a period of time, transformation can take place. And again, it's not about us and what we do, it's what God is able to do through us when we allow ourselves to be used by God.
So I told you, he's an interesting man, and that's just this little piece of his life, this work in Haiti. Let me wrap up with a scripture. It's found in Luke 5, right in verse 1, and it'll be familiar to some of you. I just want to read some of it, talk through it a little bit, maybe tie in this concept of legacy, and at the end, just issue a little challenge to you about where you are, regardless of your age, in this concept of leaving a legacy of faith for future generations. So in Luke chapter 5, it says, on one occasion, while the crowd was pressing in on him, so the him is Jesus, to hear the word of God, he, Jesus, was standing by the lake, and he saw 2 boats by the lake, but the fishermen had gone out of them and were washing their nets. So picture it, like massive crowd along this lake side. Jesus is teaching, he's talking, he's preaching, and he just looks like he just notices a couple boats sitting over there. And the thing that you're going to hear in a second is this is just an ordinary day for 3 fishermen named Peter, James, and John. It turns out they'd been fishing all night and they got zipped. They came up with nothing. And then they're sitting over there off to the side and they're cleaning their nets, folding them up, storing them, hoping to go out the next day and do a little better. And people are listening to Jesus speak, and he notices these boats by the lake. And not written in there, but I guess he probably motions over to Peter, hey, can I use your boat? And he's thinking, if I can just get in it and push it out just a little way from the shore, then I'm going to be able to speak to a lot more people. People are going to be able to hear me rather than people pressing up against me. So it says, getting into one of the boats, which was Simon's. So that's Peter. So he's known as Simon first. Jesus, sort of the name changer, gives him the name of Peter a little later on. But so this boat was Peter's. He asked him to put it out just a little from the land. And he sat down and he taught people from the boat. So you get the scene, right? What's going on here? Peter obviously said yes to Jesus, saying, "Can I borrow your boat?" See, the legacy that you leave, the breakthrough that you are looking for, it often starts with just the littlest of things. Peter just let Jesus borrow his boat. It sometimes starts with something so simple. So here's a question. Like, can Jesus borrow your boat? Like, if he asked you just for the littlest of thing in your life right now, a little bit of your time, a little bit of your giftedness, a little bit of your passion or compassion, a little bit of your career, would you let him borrow your boat? I think a bigger question is, have you given him access to your life? So I think one of the first steps to legacy is allowing Jesus to have access to your life, saying, "Okay, God, I'm yours." And then when he asks for something little, like, "Hey, dude, can I just borrow your boat for a couple minutes?" You say yes. Like, these are fishermen that had a bad day. They caught nothing. However, on this day that seemed like it was going to be a complete flop or failure, an entire legacy is about to be born. So can Jesus use your boat today in maybe some seemingly insignificant way that could lead to a legacy? So one more thing here before I read the next verse. Like, Jesus didn't need the boat. He was just asking Peter to make a decision. Like, this is the same lake that later on in the story of Jesus, he's going to walk on. Like, he's going to walk on the water. He could have done that here. He did not need the boat. There were probably lots of other boats around. He didn't need the boat, but Peter needed what Jesus had, and not the other way around. And Peter just didn't know it yet. And in verse 4 it says this, and when he had finished speaking, he said to Simon, so he finishes his sermon out there on Peter's boat, and he says to Simon, Peter, "Put out into the deep and let down your nets for a catch." And Simon answered, "Hey, master, we toiled all night and took nothing." I just can almost picture a sigh. "All right, but at your word, I'll let down my nets." And when they had done this, they enclosed a large number of fish. So think of this. Peter pushes out a little further. They put the nets down. The fish so much that it says their nets were breaking. That they signaled to their partners, so James and John's come running out to the boat, and they actually filled both boats, so much so that the boats were beginning to sink. I guess concept here wise is you don't know the moment or the decision that you're going to make that's going to change everything. See, here's what happened. The people that day, they got a sermon from Jesus, that crowd, but Peter got a calling. Peter got a legacy. Folks, legacies, again, like I said, they're not these crafted, well thought out business plans that just start here and continually go up and end here. They're not. I think if God were to show us the legacy that he wants to provide us, if he were to just hey, here's what's going to happen to you. Here's what I'm thinking. Here's what I got planned for you. One, I think it could scare us to death. Oh my gosh, no, I'm not doing that. Or two, if we knew what was out there, would we then go about it taking the credit for it? Legacies are formed with just these steps, one after the other. Psalm 119, 105, this might be familiar to a lot of you. I love this scripture. One of my favorites says, your word is a lamp to my feet and a light to my path. See, it's always been a favorite verse of mine. And if it's light outside, if it's daytime, you don't need a lamp to light your path. You can see what's going on. A lamp to light your path is needed when it's dark, or maybe when there's uncertainty or danger ahead, and you put the lamp out in front of you, and you know what? You can't see 100 yards out in front of that lamp. You can only see the few steps ahead and maybe a few steps after that. It only lights the very next steps. And I love that imagery because that's what it's like to follow God, and that's what it's like to create a legacy. It's just taking that one step after the other and trusting God that you're not going to step on a snake or step into a ditch. Often I think when we read that verse 105 there of that psalm, we don't read the next verse. See, 106 says this, I have sworn an oath and confirmed it to keep your righteous ways. So the whole scripture, the two verses in totality are saying, hey, your word, your guidance, your ways, that they are a light unto my path. And you know what? I've already made a decision. Before I started walking, I've already made a decision that I'm going to follow in your righteous ways. Daniel was making that decision. He was going to follow in God's righteous ways. Brad, this incredible work in Haiti, it didn't start with God revealing all that he was going to do. It was just, hey, just keep bringing kids down and be faithful. In your conversations with the people of Haiti, listen to them, love them, and I'll make a way as you go. That's such at the heart of legacy. Legacies are made one step at a time, one act of obedience at a time, of consistent faithfulness and following God. The story continues in verse 9. It says, and he and all who were there with him were astonished, like at the catch of fish that they had taken. So they called James and John, the sons of Zebedee, and Jesus says to Simon, do not be afraid, because these dudes were blown away. Like, hey, we fished all night, and we didn't catch nothing. You say drop your nets right there, and now we got 2 boatloads. Our nets are broken. The boats are sinking. And he says, from now on, you will be catching men. And when they had brought their boats to the land, they left everything and followed him. So in that moment, it's such a giant decision. They're leaving their fishing business, no longer catching fish. They're going to be fishers of men. Like, think about that. They went on from that day to see, blind people see, the lame healed. They went on that day to see people that were dead be raised from the dead. And when they woke up that morning, it was just a normal day of fishing. But they made the right decision in the little decisions, and God put a legacy on their lives. Peter didn't start out, he's known as the Rock. He didn't start out as Dwayne Johnson. Like, Peter started out as just a lowly fisherman, right? His name was Simon before he got into that boat. But see, Jesus is a name changer. He's a legacy leaver. Like, he will put a new name on you. He'll put a new legacy on your life. And the little things that you do today could change everything for the future. Jesus simply asked them, can I borrow your boat for a couple minutes? Blew them away with what he did in their lives with that catch. And then he said, come on, man, follow me. Let's go do something amazing. If you're sitting there watching us today and you're a young person, teenager, 20-something, what's the next right decision? I just want to challenge you, man, with all my heart. Say yes to the littlest things and watch what God will do. If you're an older, seasoned folk and you're thinking of regrets and past mistakes, and it's never too late to launch a legacy. You can start with just the right decision today. Look for the open door and go through it. Hey, I hope 2023 is an amazing year for you. I hope it's a start of a legacy or a furthering of a legacy. Thanks for just allowing Brad and I to talk to you for a little bit today about this topic. I love you all. Have a great rest of your day.